Okay, so let's get right into it. The Middle East is sitting on a powder keg. Right now, the tension between Iran, Israel, and the United States is so high that one wrong move, just one little miscalculation, could set the entire region on fire. We're going to break down how we got to this point because, honestly, you have to understand the pieces to see just how close we are to a full-blown war. Originally, we were going to start this whole explainer with a dramatic personal story, someone caught in the chaos in Dubai, witnessing the first 24 hours of a hypothetical war. But the thing is, the reality of what's happening right now is way more complex and, frankly, a lot scarier than anyone's story. So we've tossed that idea. Instead, we're going to look at the hard facts on the ground that make that kind of scenario feel terrifyingly real. That whole what if scenario, well, it starts to feel very real when you realize there's already a kind of low-level conflict happening every single day. We're talking about drone strikes in Iraq and Syria, attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea. The region is already full of explosions. And these aren't just random acts of violence. No, each one is a calculated move in this huge shadow war, and any one of them could be the spark that triggers a massive direct response. And that shadow war? It's a direct threat to, well, pretty much everyone, everywhere. Just think about the world's most critical choke points for oil and trade, places like the Strait of Hormuz. A real all-out war wouldn't just mean evacuating an airport here or there. It would literally shut down the arteries of the global economy. The risk is so high that aviation and shipping authorities have put out standing warnings for the entire region. It's that serious. And this brings us to the new reality of war in the Middle East. It's all about these low-cost but incredibly high-impact drones. They've become the weapon of choice for everyone, from governments to militias. We've seen sophisticated drones and missiles being shot down over major capitals, like Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. I mean, this isn't some sci-fi movie. This is happening now. It's a state of play where the front line is, well, it's everywhere and nowhere all at once. All right, so we've kind of set the stage here with just how tense things are. Now let's zoom out a bit and look at the big players and the core strategies that have put them on this collision course. It really boils down to two very different ways of fighting. On one side, you have the United States and Israel. Their whole military doctrine is built on deterrence, basically being so powerful that no one dares to attack you, and the option of a preemptive strike to take out a threat before it can hit them. But then, on the other side, you've got Iran. They can't match that firepower directly, so they use what's called asymmetric warfare. They rely on this huge network of proxy militias all over the region to project their power and to give them plausible deniability. So what's the trigger? What's the one thing that could tip this all over the edge? Well, the word that keeps diplomats and generals up at night is escalation. In this context, that means a direct, state-on-state military attack that just blows past all the established red lines. A hypothetical, absolute worst-case scenario would be something like a strike that targets a nation's top leadership. An act like that would make a massive, multi-front war pretty much inevitable. And this is where it gets really tricky. Tehran's reaction to any kind of attack is dangerously unpredictable. See, the Iranian government isn't just one single mind. It's this complex mix of different groups. You have hardliners who would demand an immediate, forceful retaliation, and then you have others who are terrified of a devastating war. You throw that internal power struggle into a mix with crippling economic sanctions and a lot of public anger, and you've got a recipe for a volatile situation where any decision could have totally unforeseen consequences. So the big question is, how did things get this bad this fast? The truth is, the countdown to this current crisis has been ticking for years. Let's just walk through a quick timeline of the facts. A huge moment was back in 2018 when the US pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. That basically tore up years of careful diplomacy. Then in 2020, the US assassination of General Qasem Soleimani brought both sides right to the very brink of war. In response to all this, Iran has been speeding up its nuclear program, and its proxies have been launching more and more attacks across the region, creating flashpoints just about everywhere. And listen, if you think this is some problem for the future, think again. It's happening right now. A senior official at U.S. Central Command put it in really stark terms recently. He said, and I quote, "We are in an undeclared, low-intensity, geographically dispersed war." So this isn't about planning for a war that might happen. It's about trying to manage a war that's already started. The shockwaves from a major escalation wouldn't just stay in the Middle East. No, they would be felt instantly all across the globe. And some countries are in a particularly vulnerable spot. Let's just take India as a case study here. First off, you have to think about the people. This number, 10 million, that's roughly how many Indians are living and working in the Gulf countries. These are the engineers, the doctors, the construction workers, and all their families who would be caught right in the line of fire. And then there's the economic threat, which is just massive. This chart says it all, really. India gets over half of its crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz, that tiny little waterway that Iran could easily threaten to shut down in a conflict. That isn't just a line on a map, that is India's economic lifeline. And for that exact reason, military planners and economists call a closure of the Strait of Hormuz a nightmare scenario for India. The country's oil supply would be choked off, shipping and insurance costs would go through the roof, and the huge spike in fuel prices would drive up inflation, absolutely hammering the economy, and of course, the wallet of every single citizen. So what's the public justification for the kind of preemptive strike that could lead to this whole nightmare? Well, the argument you hear over and over from Israeli and American officials is the inherent right to self-defense against what they see as an existential threat, whether that's Iran's nuclear program or its network of proxies. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? The language of self-defense often clashes with the cold, hard reality of its consequences. To get a sense at the potential human cost, just think about this number, 100. According to war game simulations run by security experts, a direct strike on Iran's nuclear facilities could lead to well over 100 civilian casualties in just the first few hours. That's from the initial attack and the immediate chaotic retaliation that would follow. You know, the more you look at this whole situation, the justifications for war, the stated goals, the likely outcomes, it's really hard to shake the feeling that we've seen this movie before. And it usually has a tragic ending. The public case for going to war often revolves around this idea of liberation. A classic example is the framing of Iran, Iraq, and North Korea as an axis of evil. The goal, we're told, is to free a nation from a dangerous dictatorship with the promise that the people can then build their own democracy. But if we just look at recent history, at places like Iraq and Libya, we see this really disturbing pattern emerge. A foreign power invades to get rid of a brutal leader. But instead of freedom and democracy, the country collapses into a power vacuum. It becomes more unstable, more violent. The lives of ordinary people actually get worse. And then, out of all that chaos, new extremist groups like ISIS are born. And that really leaves us with the most important question of all. Have the lessons of Iraq and Libya actually been learned? Would an intervention in Iran somehow break this pattern and bring the freedom that was promised? Or are we just watching the countdown to the creation of yet another failed state, which would guarantee even more suffering for millions of people?